Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm your host, Denney, and as we head into the final stretch of 2025, there's one question every smart investor should be asking: what cash flow moves can I make before the year ends to set up a stronger financial future? Now, most people slow down during the holidays, but the wealthy, they use this time to position themselves for a better 2026. And that's what today's episode is all about: smart, strategic cash flow plays you can make now to finish the year strong. And as always, we've got Rich Dad expert Andy Tanner with us. He's going to walk us through what the smart money is doing right now. But first, go to stockcastbonus.com, download your free investing tools. If you're ready to stop guessing and start investing with confidence, that's where it begins. Stockcastbonus.com. Andy, welcome back.
Man, this is an interesting challenge. You know, as you introduced the topic, I found my mind just kind of drifting off racing, thinking, about what this is, because, and here's why. There's certain things that you would do always year end, just as general, housekeeping to get it done. But the environment we're heading into has some issues in it that bear on just the decisions, no matter what quarter we were in. So how I'm going to behave in the last quarter. Certainly I'll have some things I do because it's the end of the year, but bigger than that, I wouldn't want people to construe the positions I'm taking, looking at, or even more long-term generally. So as you mentioned that, I thought, well, yeah, there are some housekeeping things, but what I'm doing doesn't necessarily reflect what I would do every year at the end of the year. So we'll delineate those two as we go far, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine, and I'm excited to kind of separate it.
Maybe I just destroyed you. Maybe I just destroyed your question by overanalyzing it. Okay, maybe I don't know, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So
we can ebb and flow all day long. But first, I do want to ask you this: stockcastbonus.com, amazing resources. I know you're always adding to it. What do our listeners receive when they go there?
There's a lot of different things. There's video and audio and ebook and all types of opportunities of various degrees and time commitments. I'll tell you the one I really like is we have a free download right now that helps people act. That's been the nice feedback. When someone has a chance to start developing different tasks and habits, it's a lot better than just learning by itself. When we learn, we make an intellectual assent to some truth. But when we act is when we get to apply that to our benefit. So learning it is a step towards a benefit, but not really a benefit that becomes tangible. Learning something without applying it is mute. It's as if you didn't learn it. And so the real change comes there. Well, we have a download there that really helps people start with habits and very tangible things start to do in their life that bring results. Action brings results. We have to learn to act, but we have acting, to get the results. So go there. There's free stuff, stuff you can have. It's going to be great. So stockcastbonus.com. There you go.
There we go. I'm excited to dig in there a little bit more. All right. Q4. It's kind of a different time of year. Why is Q4 such a powerful window for investors and business owners? Like, what makes this time of year different?
Well, taxes, if Tom Wheelwright were here, he'd say it's all about taxes. And I would say, well, yeah, in this case, a lot of it is, because taxes drive behavior. And the government sets out taxes to, herd people in a certain way. And it's kind of their stick and carrot. And so businesses and investors and oil guys and real estate guys, they're going to follow that tax code. So this is really important for Q4 because you don't want an accountant as much as you want a tax advisor, and they're different. Accountants look at what you did and say, well, here's an accounting of what you did. And they go with the bookkeeper and they say, here's what you did and here's what your tax is. That's accounting for things. A tax advisor like Tom Wheelwright, I meet with him quarterly. I have a quarterly meeting with Tom. I meet with him 4 times a year. And one of the most important ones is Q4 because we're going to look at, the ramifications tax-wise. What do we want to sell? What do we want to buy? How do we want to position ourselves? The biggest liability on a financial statement most of us will have in our life. We'll have more money leave the expense column through taxes than any other way. If you add them all up, sales tax and, all the sin taxes with beer and cigarettes and gasoline tax and hotel tax. And I mean, there's probably hundreds of taxes we pay. And when you add them up, you'll pay more in taxes than you ever pay in a house payment or a car payment or any other payment in your life. So yeah, taxes is probably the number one thing that comes to my mind when there's year end, because we want, and that's all individualized. So number one on the list is you get with your tax advisor and you see if there's a position you want to liquidate. Well, make sure you understand if you're going to try to go from good to, it's often hard to move from one stock to another because of the tax ramifications. If I have a 20% capital gain, do I really want to give that up? And I have to assume that out of the gate, I got another 20 in the other one that I'll be taxed on. So it's even further. So to sell stuff, it takes a pretty bullish, optimistic capital gain or cash flow position to get you to move. But if you are, taxes are number one. The second thing that's always nice about Q4 is the holidays are for retail just massive. And so positioning for what is called the Santa Claus rally, I think a company like Amazon, eBay, all the online retailers, not realtors, all the online retailers, the trend that I've seen is just more and more and more. And I put myself in this group. I mean, the idea of going to a mall during the holidays for me is just, I think I'd rather have a root canal than do that. I'm telling you, it's just, it's terrible. So yeah, the positioning in retail and for the Santa Claus rally, particularly online, if I were going to speculate, those can be very attractive if you want a short-term swing trade or some type of an option trade that would benefit you. Very much like the idea, if you want to get technical, of butterfly trades on stuff like that, because you kind of have to hit it in the right, what we call a targeted butterfly. And the reason a targeted butterfly can be nice if you want to speculate a little bit, it's not my core, not my cash flow core, but coming into Q4, if I can get a chart, run some technical numbers, look at a company like Amazon and say, this is where we think a Santa Claus rally could wind up. Well, that allows me to have a very, 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 very low risk, very inexpensive target butterfly, a very, very, very high reward if it works out. The probability is where those are rough, because you're shooting a 3-point shot. You're trying to land in a certain cylinder or a certain triangle, and to hit the sweet spot maybe brings down our probability a little bit. And so normally where I'd stay away from some of that because of the low probability, is this a lottery ticket? With the Santa Claus rally, if you pick the right ones, it has a better probability of maybe hitting one of those targeted butterfly areas. So that's a great trade for speculator to look into at Q4. And, stuff like that, Santa Claus stuff, all that. And so that's maybe a smaller picture of some of the type of thinking I have in Q4 is Noah Davidson on our team is much better than I'm at this, but there's, in fact, we might have to put out a report on this. You gave me a great idea. I did one on this a couple years ago in the Rich Dad Expert newsletter where I talked about seasonality. And of course, in the summer, you've got, people burning gas on vacation, driving around. Well, and there's different seasonality, particularly in retail around Q4. So we would look at the Q4 seasonality and see what things happen. A lot of businesses try to tie up a lot of loose ends around Q4. So you'd look at a company as they look at their Q4. If you're investing in them, you'd want to be privy to what their plans are. So that's the Q4 stuff. But mostly it's a real good chance to get your year evaluated. How did I do this year? What do I want to do next year? What assets have served me well? How do I want to position myself? Basic questions. Probably the bigger one, I don't want to change the title of the podcast, but if you're asking me, what are the standard Q4 things? Okay, that's some of the standard Q4 stuff you look for. But if you're asking me what I'm doing, I probably won't do a targeted butterfly, because I have maybe bigger fish to fry than try to, like, if I score a nice bucket, on getting a nice targeted butterfly, I say, oh yeah, it's nice money. but that's kind of a one-off Q4 fun thing to do. The core is cash flow, and the core really doesn't change much with Q4. I'm going to do this. I'm going to collect the same rents in Q4 as Q1. I'm going to collect the same dividends in Q4 as Q1. It's really, my thinking is much of a bigger picture. So not to change the question, but if you're asking me what I'm going to do in Q4, it has very little to do with Q4. So I guess that's why the question was kind of a different one for me, because I thought, well, yeah, I thought, what do most people do in Q4? And then I thought, well, but what am I going to do in Q4? And what I'm going to do has nothing to do with the calendar.
Ooh, I like that. I really like that reframe of that question.
Yeah, I hate doing that, because that's being a bad interviewee. I should just answer the damn question. So
No, I love it, because it allows me to think about it in a different angle that I wasn't thinking about at the start. But that does me I'm struggling to talk as well. It does lead me to a question, and it's, how do you start building momentum going into the new year? We have this new quarter coming up. Sure, there's these short-term trades,
yeah.
but really, just like you said, we want to build cash flow. So how can we start building momentum as we go into this new year?
Well, you could ask that two ways. You could say, well, what trades are you going to make? That's an advice question, right? And I already covered some of the trades I'm going to make. I do a targeted butterfly, for example, something like that. Some types of options trade. The reason the options trades are nice around this time of year is you can really position yourself with high upside, low upside, or low downside, with maybe a slight improvement in probability that you might not have the other days of the year. But other than that, then you could also take that question as, what can you do to get momentum? Well, that's not an advice question. That's an education question. And as I mentioned earlier, because the tax year, you have this cutoff, and because the tax year ends December 31st, it's just a time of closing up old and new. And there's the traditional, bringing in the new year, New Year's resolution. It's a new year. It's a nice mental demarcation, but that's kind of a fantasy, because you could decide today to change your life, right? I've had more success in like physical stuff where I say, okay, it's time to lose that, 10, 20 pounds. For me, that's what it is. And so I fluctuate a lot. But that usually happens to me like, August or April. I never keep my resolutions around the holidays. But as far as financial stuff goes, it's a wonderful time to gain momentum in terms of habit. And I think that's more important than what trade you make in Q4. As I look at each year's end, my wife and I don't do well with my fit. I usually never set fitness goals on the new year, but I'll tell you, we're dead serious about evaluating how we did in that year. It's a wonderful time to evaluate. We're dead serious about, short-term goals for 1 year out, which are very short-term, right? And so it is a time of evaluation. That's the biggest thing you can do to build momentum, is say, how am I going to behave differently? Not what am I going to buy that's magic. There isn't a magic to one quarter over another. There's no special insight we're going to get where, well, now it's Q4, we get a chance to get rich. There's a chance to get rich all 4 quarters, right? There's nothing special about Q4. But if you wanted to make it special, you'd use it as a time to say, what habits am I going to have that are going to make me a better investor, a better father, a better person? What habits are there? And if you went into Q4, if you really want momentum for Q1 next year, 2026, you say, okay, what are the habits I've had during this last year? And what are the habits I'm going to put in during the next year? And make it about your behaviors, be, do, have. Who are you going to become? Did I become the person this year that I want to become, or did I follow short? Who do I want to become next year? So I think in terms of goal setting and having a demarcation of a flipping of the calendar, that's great stuff if you can pull it off. But I would feel weird about saying, oh, yeah, Q4, that's where the opportunity is. The opportunities in the market have everything to do with things outside the calendar. Oh, there's urgency. But really, the calendar is probably the maybe it's overrated for some people. Oh, the Santa Claus rally, time to make money. If you look at it historically, yeah, there's usually a boom in December. There usually is. Seasonality wise, there's a bit of a pop in December. That doesn't guarantee it's going to happen this December. So, in terms of gaining momentum, I think it's more psychological. I think it's more behavioral. I think it's more about habits and about your personal development than any specific trades other than the type of stuff I mentioned.
Very good. Well, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Listeners, if you want 2026 to be a breakout year, the time to act is now. We're always talking about action. So coming up, Andy's going to break down cash flow plays, the habits that we can talk about before the ball drops on December 31st.
Well, and I'll tell you what I'm actually doing and what I'm thinking about. I mean, that's probably as important as the calendar. So I'll just tell you this is what I'm doing.
Very good. All right. So don't forget, go to stockcastbonus.com, grab your free tools and investing resources. We've built these resources to help you to invest smarter, start making real financial progress right now. Stick around. We'll be right back.
So far, it's been great. I needed a source where I could really enrich my education through stocks. I didn't really have an avenue for it, and it's helped me a lot. The simplicity has really gotten me on the track to where I enjoy the learning as well as it's really solidifying in my mind. And like, they're not just trying to sell you something, they really care about the people that are in the course, and they really do care about you and your personal goals, and what you want to do is to help you and your family and whatever your goals are in life through that. So it's really been great.
Welcome back to Rich Dad Stockcast. I'm here with Andy Tanner, and now we're going to get into the real reason you tuned in. What cash flow moves can you make right now to finish strong? So let's get tactical here. Andy, you teased us a little bit before we went to break with what are you thinking? Pulling the curtain, back a little bit. So I'm just going to ask, what are you thinking as we go into Q4 here?
Well, I don't always like reframing the question, but sometimes I do, because I think it, like you said, offers people a different perspective. And it might answering the questions I did might be anticlimactic for, well, there's no great way to go from 0 to $1 million in Q4 without putting any effort or work or anything like that. I think reframing it that way helps people think about it better. Think about this. Would you like, there's a seasonality business that only makes money in December. It loses money 11 quarters out of the year. And it's one of Buffett's favorite companies. He only makes money one month a year. And he owns a company called Berkshire Hathaway does. It's called See's Candies. And during the holidays is where that's their big deal. Everyone's buying them to give each other for gifts, and a little bit of Valentine's, but mostly it's Christmas. So, if you look at a business and you say, hey, I'm gonna make hay while the sun shines. My sister has a business. She bought a cornfield, not because she wanted to raise corn, because she makes far more money mowing the maize out of it at Halloween and charging people to walk through her cornfield. So she makes, I don't know, she keeps doing it every year, and the crowds seem to be there. So I guess she's doing okay. I don't ask her personally, but that's seasonality. And so she'll go to the expos to say, what are the new Halloween crap, you can buy and scare people with. And she'll do that every year. And that's her big, everything is for that moment. So those are businesses that I quote because they're valid. You can go that way. And if it works out, it works out. There's more than one way to heaven. The other way to think about it, though, is let's look at the dividend I'll get or the rent that I'll get from cash flow. Well, I don't get a surge in December, but I don't get a drop off in January or February or March or April or May or June or July or any other month of the year. So when a person takes a cash flow approach, they say, well, should I light my hair on fire because it's December or because it's November, right? Or should I just say, look, taxes are important, mindset is important, but I'm gonna build cash flow, and what I really am looking at the end of Q4 is how am I going to make more cash flow the next year than the previous year? That has nothing to do with the timing of the market by the calendar seasonality. It has to do with how do I raise my game generally as an investor. This is a great time of year to do it. Get my taxes advised on, and that's the biggest thing. So when I look at my Q4, I say, okay, great, it's Q4, that's kind of done. Then I step away from that and I say, now, what do I see for the next 10 years? That's way more important to me. And I've been talking about this a lot. I just did a paper. In fact, I told you I was going to send it to you and I forgot to, so I need to rectify that. Or did I send it to you? I can't remember if I sent it to you.
No, I haven't read it yet.
I should have sent it to you. Yeah. So we sent it to the people that subscribe to the Rich Dad Experts newsletter. They got it. So that was the first people I gave it to. And it's, I'm not the best writer. I've written a couple of books with help, but I'm not the best writer. But I really worked hard on this to articulate my case because I've never really predicted. I don't like predicting bull markets. I really don't do it very often. I kind of just say, look, it's cash flow and cash flow and cash flow. I don't often comment on the value of the S&P or the value of the NASDAQ or the level of the Russell 2000 or the Dow. I'm more about, I don't really care about that. I care about, do my students understand how to get cash flow that they can spend to make their lives better? Because that's what affects them rather than where the S&P goes. And so I was at an event a few weeks ago with Tom Wheelwright, my tax advisor, and he was in Park City, Utah. He lives in Phoenix, but he had a conference for a bunch of his franchisees that he has. He has a franchise business. And these franchisees came, and there was a bunch of them. Robert came and spoke. It was good to see him. He hadn't seen my kids in a while. He's like, wow, Zach's 6'10". What the heck happened? It was fun to see Robert. And then I had a chance to speak, and Tom about fell out of his chair. He said, Andy, I've known you for 20 years or so, and I've never seen you predict a bull market before the way you did today on stage. And the reason is, and we've talked about this on podcast the last couple of weeks, I'm going to continue to make it a theme because it bears repeating. When people realize the difference between general robotics, general computing, and advancement of the past, and compare it with AI, there is a difference that I see in that I've always been in the camp strongly that if someone invents a computer, be like, oh, this is going to take away jobs because we're more efficient with a computer. No, all it does is make everyone more productive, and no one loses their job because of a computer. The internet costs a few jobs. If you're a travel agent, you got killed. You're going to go to Delta now and just book it yourself. It cuts out middlemen, or middle people, I guess I should say. And so I've always been in the camp that if you invent a new robot, sure, the assembly line changes, but it's just that creative destruction is creative. It actually creates more jobs in the future. And I've always been in that camp. Not this time. And there's two reasons for it. Number one is the preliminary data. What we're finding is AI is costing jobs. For example, if you look at attorneys' offices, now we can get one paralegal can do so much more work that you can reduce your paralegal staff, and an attorney can do a lot more work. They want to continue to bill the hours, so it's more the paralegal, but we're seeing things reduced. We're seeing as people try to get wage increase and say, look, we're going to pass a law that says you have to make this much money. That's very difficult to legislate in capitalism, because as soon as you do that, they'll say, okay, well, now I have a choice. I can hire a person or build a kiosk. It's now better to build the kiosk. So they price themselves out of the job. That happens all the time. If you look at, some of the shipping companies that have gone belly up, labor's too expensive. So why is this different? And interrupt me if I'm being too long-winded. Why is this different? There's three things a human can do. And technology has been able to improve some of those things individually, but they've always stayed isolated. They haven't had the interconnectivity, these three things. So I'm going to tell you what these three things are. Number one is perception. We have five senses where we perceive the world. Oh, it's too hot in here. I can change it. Oh, it's too cold in here. Oh, the sun's bright. I need to block the sun. Oh, there's a child in the road. I need to navigate that. Oh, I can make observations through sight, sound, smell. I can observe. Well, individually at this point, we've been able to build machines that are better than we are. I can't see the microbes on the sponge in the kitchen. I can't see the moons that circle Jupiter until Galileo, put them on in his telescope. And I can't hear the things, the sonar that the submarine can hear, right? The machines, every sense, whether it's visual, whether, there's my eyes have a certain pixelation, a certain ability to focus that's going away. The machines do it better. Thinking, that one was human beings are so stupid with lack of wisdom. I don't know if we think better, but we do process pretty well. But, calculators were invented for a reason. That old Texas Instruments. Remember when the school teacher saw those red numbers on the TI calculator and said, "Oh, you can't use that." And now you go to a calculus class, first thing you got to buy is a Hewlett Packard graphing calculator. So the ability to process what we perceive, the ability to process and make decisions and crunch data has always been really good. Third is the ability to manipulate the environment. To pick something up, move it over here, put part A on part B in the assembly line, essentially. Make stuff, drive cars, manipulate, make a crane, build a house, wire a house, the physical manipulation of the world to get stuff done. Well, it kind of occurred to me when I was, I'm riding in my Tesla and I'm just letting it drive just to see. Just the first time I turned on the autopilot and it, I typed in the grocery store, said go, and it did all three. It perceived the road, it saw the road just as well as I could. It processed what we wanted to do. It understood what I want, where I want to go. It kept all the laws, was compliant. And then it manipulated me in the physical world. It picked me up and took me and put me down somewhere else. And all three were there for the first time. For the first time, all three were there, where you didn't need a human being to kind of get that connection going. I get the data and then I feed into here and then I go do something. It was automated front to back. That's different. And anyone who wants to argue with me is free to argue with me, because I might be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm just giving an opinion, not saying this is how it's going to be. I don't get dogmatic. I just think this is what I see. Well, that's an interesting thing. When if I'm the guy that sees that, that's one thing. But if it continues to happen and other people start to see that, then we'll start to worry a little bit. Right now, no one's worried. It's status quo. The sky's falling and global warming. All that's in the future. But once this wave begins to hit home, and someone's neighbor gets laid off, or their son or daughter gets laid off, and it hits real, people are going to realize that there's a trend. Now, so that's the first concept to hold in our head. So anything you want to say about that, Dell, before I move on to the next part of this, is that the idea that labor is going to change cannot be disputed by anyone. Labor will change. How labor happens is changing, and it's changing rapidly, and the change is faster and larger and more significant and different than the other creative destructions we've had in the past, at least from where I see it.
Beautiful. All right. So I see what the foundation that you're laying here with that. Now, how does this apply for the future, what you're seeing? Yeah.
Well, the reason I paused there is that's important to understand, because if we don't think that it's going to change, it still doesn't matter. We still want to do the same things, but if it does change, it'll accelerate something. So here's the second thing that you think about. When confidence begins to drop and it becomes a wave of change, it's very destructive. I'll give you an example. So let's say I live in Zimbabwe and I have some confidence in the Zimbabwe currency to where I have it in my bank and I'm using it in commerce. And all of a sudden, the value of that currency starts to drop for whatever reason. In this case, it was printing too much. But it doesn't matter what the reason is. It just matters that the confidence went away. So when people look at the future of that dollar, that Zimbabwe dollar, and they say, I don't have confidence in the future of where this is going, I'm going to abandon it, and I'm going to go look at a US dollar or some gold. I'm going to do something different. So it's really important to understand how psychology works. I'm going to abandon this now because now I finally think it has no future. And that's how hyperinflations work. As soon as you lose confidence in a mark, you go to Argentina, wherever, there's rubles, dinars. You see it all the time, that when they say there is no future here, I've got to go somewhere else. And there's a mass exodus that makes it even worse, because the more people that lose confidence in it, the less valuable it becomes. So if I look at the world and I say, well, what are the possibilities? Many people, especially the socialists, and this would be awesome for, in a way, it could create a really cool thing for capitalists if they try to pull this off, is they're going to say we got to have universal basic income. We're going to get to where there's not enough labor to go around. And this has happened before, where, I've been in closed environments where there wasn't enough work for all the people to do and everyone got bored, right? And I've seen that firsthand. So people can say, well, we'll just have UBI. We'll just tax these companies and give people money. Well, if they did that, those of us that still remain producers are simply going to compete against each other for that UBI income that gets redistributed, and we want more of our share of it. That's fine. COVID was a great example of how UBI makes poor people poor and rich people richer, because all that UBI, that we gave in COVID, all that income, say, oh, you can't pay your rent here, or you can't pay this here. Well, look what that did to the rich. They just took that money from the poor and sold more stuff. It just enabled them to hand money faster. And the redistribution isn't distributed among the poor. Now it's redistributed among the rich. In other words, once that money was given out, who got it? So it's just capitalism all over again, right? Did they get it from a job or get it from the government? We're just competing for it. So whatever scenario, whatever dystopian, crap we want to drum up and imagine, the fact of the matter is if I sit there and I say, I used to come to this podcast because I wanted to get out of the rat race. How do I get out of the rat race? Now the conversation changes to, okay, there's no rat race to go to. What am I going to do now? Necessity is the mother of invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And people will go to jobs because they're convenient, and it's a lot easier to get a job than to run the company, for sure. Way easier to get a job than run a company. Way easier to get a job than learn how to invest. All you got to do is do what you did in school. Show up and do what you're told. So jobs, as long as you can show up and do what you're told, they tend to win over investing, even though they make no sense, because it's just an easier path of your life. It doesn't take personal development to do it as much. So my thought is if people begin to see that there's the rat race is going away, and that we're finding technology to run the rat race instead of people, that means we don't need the rats. We can exterminate them. And in the coldness of a balance sheet and business decisions, cold efficiency rules the world. Cold efficiency. What helps our balance sheet look better? And if it's a machine, then it's a machine. And that's just how it works. It doesn't really care about what about humanity? Unfortunately, it's not how balance sheets operate. And so what I think is likely to happen is there'll be a paradigm shift. So this is the third thing, is there'll be a shift from focusing our time and energy and $500,000 student loans to get a job to putting time and energy and $500,000 in debt into own the labor. Because if doing labor doesn't make sense, then how are you going to get ahead? The sad thing about UBI is that everyone would be the same. And that would be a horrible world to live in, for everyone to be the same. Because I love watching the World Series and find out who is the best at something. And I love watching someone win a gold medal, say that person is not the same as me. They are not my equal. They are far superior than me. I love it. And when I look at my life and I say, I want and will claim the freedom to work harder than my neighbor, to serve more people than my neighbor does, to build more, give more, teach more, to give more than my neighbor, with the hope that the world gives back more to me. Because I want more than what the government is willing. I don't like the idea of the government saying this is where you've got to be. And that's what Social Security is. We already have universal basic income. It's called Social Security, and that's where the poverty line will always be. right around there. It's just how it works. So if you want a new poverty line, make a new law, and there's your new poverty line. As people that like me say, I want to own it, this is what you're going to see, and you're already seeing it. There's a lot of talk about buybacks now. Why are companies buying back their shares at a rate that we really is remarkable, right? Why, when Berkshire Hathaway hits a certain number, why is Warren buying more of his stuff? Because the advantage of going public is to raise capital. Once you've gone public, raised it, and been there, it just makes sense to get your company back. It just makes sense to get your company back and not share it. Once you've used their money and you've grown, and if it doesn't make sense anymore, start buying them back. Because ownership, Warren Buffett said this way, a person who believes in American business and will seek out to participate at the lowest level in that business. What does it mean to participate in a company at the lowest level? It means ownership. It doesn't mean going to a job. You can participate by showing up to work and putting part A on part B, or sitting at the computer and doing the thinking until the AI and the robot can do it. Don't tell me there's not 3D printers that will build houses. Don't tell me that won't happen. Don't tell me the robot won't be able to wire, plumb, and put in HVAC, because they can do it. Don't tell me that the world won't be automated. If you'd told my dad in 1955 that his car would be self-driving, he never would have believed you. So don't shortcut this technology, because it's going to happen. So what if all of a sudden everyone realizes that there's no future in labor? There's no future in labor. The trend is that labor will become worth less and less and less and less, as it can do more and more and more and more, as it can do darn near anything a human can. Name me something you can do that a machine will not be able to do in 5 or 6 years. I think we'll probably stick with a jury that's not a computer and a judge that's not a computer. We'll probably want humans in control of that stuff. You might find a handful, but most of the things that a human can do, you could say, all right, if you gave a bunch of scientists the task, say, replace that job now. Everything you can see, the machines can see. Everything you can think, the machines can think. Every decision you can make, the machines can decide better than you. And then if you add automation to it and hook it to, most of it's white collar, you don't need automation. I'm just saying blue collar, you need automation. You could do it. You could do it. So if we look at that trend and say there's not a future in labor by participation, the future in labor is by owning the labor. And here's your problem. There's just so many shares to own, and BlackRock and Vanguard and Fidelity and, the big institutions, they already own a lot of these shares because they've been skimming your 401k at 1% to 2% every year. So they've been taken already and building a massive amount of owning the labor. So and then they start buying back shares, which means that there's even less shares to go with. And a lot of companies are already private. So the future is going to be a land grab, not of physical land, but is the landscape of labor owning it. Who owns the production? Who owns production? And there's only so much production to own. And as there's a lot of people that can't find their way by doing the labor anymore, well, now you got to own the labor. You're forced out of the rat race, not out of your own volition. You got to get out now. And that's the way to get ahead. Well, think of this, Del. What if everybody starts buying stocks because of this? Not everyone can start their own business. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Certainly AI will help that happen. But not everyone's going to have the gig economy anymore. So that's long-winded, but that's what I'm doing, is I'm positioning for that. That's what I'm doing in Q4, because I think it's bigger than Q4. I think it's much like we never had AI. We never had a Q4 under these circumstances. And I think the next, I look at the last 3 years, and I think if we advance as much in the next 3 as the last 3, can you imagine where we'll be in 10? And, I'm still not old enough to have a short horizon. If I lived to where my dad is, I got another 30, 40 years to go here. And if I look at the next 10, I think we're going to see, I think despite the crap that goes on that could make us go bearish and the unsustainable fiscal irresponsibility and all that other stuff, I just see such a change in labor that I have to believe people are going to want to own it. Because the one thing that won't change is that consumers, the cash flow pattern is the consumer gives cash flow to the producer. That won't change. Hell, we should be doing it now anyway. Like, people should be buying ownership. Everything I'm advocating for, I've advocated for 30 years. Buy assets, buy ownership, buy production, buy something that produces value. Buy that, buy it. What I'm saying now is that decision makes more sense. It made sense yesterday and it'll make sense tomorrow, but it really makes sense for tomorrow. It really makes sense to own that labor. And that's the beautiful part of shares. I mean, I don't know how to build this. I don't know how to build it. Steve Jobs did, and he shared it with me. So I own the company with him. And the idea that I can leverage production by him sharing what he has with me, literally sharing it. They're called shares of stock. I have a share in this. This is part mine. That's the future. And I just can't imagine that if everybody's trying to buy shares, can you imagine what the prices of ownership will be when that's the only place to go for the average guy to take full advantage of labor and get ahead? The demand for stock, if you can't earn money here, how are you going to do it? You can settle for UBI. All that does is put the poverty line in a different place, because it'll just create a bigger wealth gap. So buy shares. And the key to buying shares is what? Financial education, knowledge and habits. So we really like where we're at, because we don't think people have the knowledge and the habits. We're absolutely using AI to teach better, right? 100%. But we'll always keep this element no matter what happens. There will be a need for human connection in some things. I don't need a human connection for most things I buy. In teaching, probably. Teachers still might squeak through. I don't know. But I will tell you this, ownership of labor is what I'm thinking about in Q4. Not because it's Q4, but because it's what I'm thinking about. So there's a long-winded thing that I've said 100 times, and you'll probably hear this again from me, because I don't think that's going to change over the next 10 years. I think we're going to be talking about AI for a long, long time. So there you go.
We didn't record any of that. Can you repeat that, what you just said? No, I'm only kidding. That was amazing right there. That was the best quarter I've ever put into Andy Tanner and let him go. I think that was phenomenal. That was right
probably
there.
What is it? 5:00 now? Time to quit, so.
I have one more question. I have one more question for you.
I'm passionate about it, Del. I really am. I from where I sit, I think it's likely. I think it's very likely to see a boom long term. A bust first, and it's very much like 2000. Bust first when all the pretenders, get cleaned out. There's big pullback, the bubble, because people haven't figured it out yet. The 2000 bust, people didn't know what it was. They're all trying to do internet trade, and then the FANG trade emerged, right? Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Amazon. It emerged. Well, it'll emerge again, and it's going to blow people's minds, man. Stocks are going to be so valuable because it's the only way to own the labor, because you can't participate in it.
That makes total sense. All right, so we got the big picture. I'm going to go small picture real quick. If someone's listening right now, wants to take action this week, what's the first move they should make to make 2020 or 2026 their best year yet?
Well, I guess the first thing is to determine you're going to do something different. People hate change and they love improvement, but this is the same word. Because if you've improved, you're not the same as you were before. I've improved my diet. Well, you're not doing the same thing anymore. Oh, I've improved my sleep habits. Well, that means you're not doing the same thing. So improvement and change are the same thing. and people resist change. They get a comfort in their routine. So I guess the first thing you would do is say, how do I break my routine? And what do I do to improve that routine, the actions of my life that bring better results? Because you can learn anything you want to learn, but once you learn it, it has to be translated into improved behavior. So the first thing a person does is say, moving into Q4, I'm going to get an advisor. Maybe I haven't done that before. That's improved behavior, tax advisor. Maybe I'm going to do some habits that are different. Maybe I'm going to allocate a budget for learning stocks. Maybe I'm going to allocate a budget for, something else in my life, but I'm going to change, and I'm going to change in ways that improve. And that's the constant thrill and the constant challenge and the beautiful story of those of us that embrace personal development on a daily basis. We're trying to get better every day. It's an incredible life, for sure. Incredible life. So that would be the first thing, is that decision. Now, if you've made that decision, say, yeah, okay, well, what specifically then? I've made the decision. What can I change specifically? Stockcast, go to Stockcast Bonus, download the free stuff, read it, and then say, these are behaviors that would be life-changing for me and bring me abundance and bring me security and be a thrill to not just scroll all the time, but really have a structured, organized blueprint that can take me where I'd like to go. That would be amazing. So that would be the thing, an internal decision to say, hey, I'm going to make Q4 important to me with the changes in my life. As we close out this and get further away from COVID and now into a new AI world, I think I want to be smart as an investor in this new AI world. I think I want to learn more about. I spent my whole life learning how to work for money in college. Why don't I learn now how money works for me and take that position as I see a potential for that to be even more lucrative than it ever was? It starts with, for these guys, it start with stockcastbonus.com, because that way you can get going for free. You don't have to put out any money to do that yet. And not that would be a bad thing. Nothing wrong with investing in yourself after college is over or high school is over. I invest all the time. It's great. So that's what I would do. I'd go to Stockcast Bonus and take advantage of that free offer and, get going.
There we go. I love it. What a great podcast. I hope everyone enjoyed this.
Yeah, you put a nickel in me and I go forever.
I love, that's what we love about you, Andy. Now, listeners, most people, they coast to the finish line, but the ones who win the next year are the ones who finish this one strong. So if you're serious about building cash flow and getting ahead, this is your moment right now. And again, huge thank you to Andy for bringing the heat today, for sure. And if you want to go deeper, guys, go to stockcastbonus.com. Just like Andy said, you'll find free tools, free resources, great education there to help you to build real cash flow and smarter strategies before year end. Now, if you got value from today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, share this with someone who's ready to finish strong. I say this at every podcast, but the revelation that I received today, this is definitely one to share. And guys, you're not here by accident. You're building something that most people won't. Stay smart, stay invested, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Del.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.